Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's dive into today's story, where what started as a peaceful apartment life took a sharp turn with the arrival of a classic Karen. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Karen complained about our dog, spread lies online, and ended up with a harassment order. About 6 years ago, we moved into our apartment and absolutely loved it. For the first few years, things were peaceful. However, everything changed when a new neighbor, let's call her Karen, moved in about a year ago. She doesn't live in our hallway, but in the adjoining building, sharing a wall with us. At first, everything seemed fine. We introduced ourselves, made it clear we were open to communication, and even explained that we have a small dog who's calm and rarely barks. The problem started a few weeks later. We began receiving complaints about our dog barking. Not just one or two complaints, but a barrage of them, often 3 or 4 times a week. This was baffling because our dog only barks in 3 situations: when the doorbell rings, when he's startled, which is rare, or during a short play session that never lasts more than 5 to 10 minutes. He's incredibly mellow and quiet, which is why all our neighbors adore him. Some have even volunteered to dog sit him when we're away. Despite this, the complaints keep coming. At first, we didn't know who was behind them because they were filed anonymously with the superintendent, but soon it became clear it was Karen. She started banging on our walls whenever she thought we were being too loud. One weekend at around 10:30 a.m., we'd been playing with our dog for around 5 minutes when she aggressively pounded on the wall. Mind you, we live in a concrete building with 30-centimeter thick walls. It's nearly soundproof. We tried to keep things calm and even spoke to other neighbors in our hallway, but none of them were bothered by our dog or thought we were being loud. In fact, many of them were shocked we were getting complaints at all. For a while, Karen's complaints subsided, but recently things escalated. Not only did she file more complaints with the landlord and superintendent, but she also started ranting about us in a neighborhood Facebook group. While we were out of the country on holiday, she posted a lengthy tirade accusing us of making our dog bark intentionally to torment her. She also made wildly inappropriate comments about our personal lives, including details about our private life, and claims that I, as a woman, have loud, fake orgasms. Although she later edited the post, the superintendent and several neighbors had already seen it and took screenshots. Upon returning home, we discussed the issue with the superintendent, who assured us he was on our side. He's aware of Karen's behavior and mentioned that we're not the only ones she's targeted. Other neighbors have also shared stories of her filing baseless complaints about them. To protect ourselves, we installed CCTV cameras after repeated instances of Karen banging on the walls and falsely accusing me of sneaking onto her property. We also spoke to our landlord and gathered evidence, including her Facebook rant, to document her harassment. After consulting with the superintendent, we decided to file a harassment order against Karen. The superintendent provided all the necessary documentation to support our case. The harassment order was granted, and Karen was warned by authorities to cease her behavior immediately. Since then, things have been much quieter, but we're staying vigilant. While it's been a stressful year dealing with Karen, we're glad to have the support of our landlord, superintendent, and neighbors who all see her for who she is. It's so sad and annoying when these people who have nothing going on in their lives take to complaining about those who do have a life. It's infuriating to deal with them. These are not happy individuals. If they even have any family, they probably want nothing to do with this person because they're just so darn unhappy and mad at the world. And our second story: asbestos burials on my 100-year-old farm from the HOA. My grandfather, my mother's father, owned a farm in the USA that had been in our family for over 100 years. His grandfather had bought the land back before cars became commonplace, and ever since, the farm had been passed down from generation to generation. Although it hadn't turned much profit in recent years, Grandpa kept it going. He used to say the farm was his place of power, where he could breathe fully and feel like the true master of his life. I spent every summer there as a kid. It was like my own little hideaway from the world. There were cows that looked at you like you owed them money, chickens that ran around like they had an exam in an hour, and of course my old grandpa, who always wore the same denim overalls no matter the weather. When my mom remarried a German man, she moved to Germany. I was 16 and she allowed me to stay here and visit her occasionally. By the time I went to college, the farm barely turned enough profit to cover the workers' wages and pay for the essentials, so Grandpa decided to sell off most of the animals to help me pay for college. He kept one horse and a few chickens, and you could say he basically retired at that point. Unfortunately, Grandpa died while I was in my second year of college. It was a tough time, and after the funeral, I felt awful. Luckily, his friend, who lived about 40 minutes away from our farm, offered to buy the remaining animals since no one else could look after them. My mom came only for the funeral, and a week later, she returned to Germany. As I found out after the funeral, Grandpa had left the land to me in his will. For the time being, though, my plan was to continue my education, so I had to leave. My first trip back to the farm after I finished college was supposed to be a short one. I wanted to visit the old house, walk through the fields where I used to play, and deal with a few legal matters. But when I drove up to the farm, I saw that the fence Grandpa had always maintained so carefully was partially destroyed. Instead of well-kept pastures, there were ruts and tracks left by heavy machinery. At first glance, it all looked strange. I decided to walk around the property to figure out what had happened here. In several places, the ground looked like it had recently been dug up. A growing sense of unease washed over me. Memories of how Grandpa treated every inch of that land with love only fueled my indignation. While I was inspecting the property, an old pickup truck drove up to the farm. Out stepped Mr. Ferguson, Grandpa's friend who had bought our animals. He was the only person in the area with whom I still had any connection. "Oh, kid, I heard you came back. How have you been?" he asked, shaking my hand. Mr. Ferguson squinted at the broken fence and asked in surprise, "Kid, I thought you hired some people to prep the site for construction. Wasn't that your idea?" I froze, confused. "What construction?" I asked, feeling a surge of anxiety inside. "Well, I saw crews with trucks coming and going a couple of weeks ago. A bulldozer showed up. I assumed you decided to do some work here on the farm. They leveled some land, dug some holes. It all looked pretty serious," he said, shrugging and glancing around the property. "I didn't hire anyone," I said with a frown. "I had no idea anything was going on." Ferguson frowned as if he wanted to say something else, but instead just shook his head. "Strange business. You know, it's interesting. All those guys I saw worked for that new HOA that was formed around here recently. I recognize their trucks and logos from a mile away. And the son of the HOA president owns a demolition company, right? Maybe you should talk to him." Inside, I was boiling. As soon as Mr. Ferguson left, I decided to circle the farm and see what else those workers had messed up. After a few hours of looking around, I found evidence of their handiwork, piles of gray trash with fibrous strands that clearly resembled asbestos, cruelly buried pits, and heavy vehicle tracks leading right up to my border with the HOA's property. The next morning, I called the local sheriff, but didn't get much help. He looked it all over, half-heartedly scratched at his tattered notepad, and only said, "Well, maybe you gave permission and then forgot. Or maybe there was a mistake with the property lines. Happens all the time." "It's not a mistake," I insisted. "They're dumping waste here, hazardous waste at that. This isn't just a violation, it's a crime." The sheriff only shrugged. "Then you need to gather evidence. The court needs solid proof." I was about to handle things on my own when that evening she showed up at the farm. Karen, the HOA president's wife. Her big black SUV stopped with such a screech that I got chills down my spine. Out stepped a woman with fire in her eyes and a voice loud enough to burst an eardrum. Karen clearly didn't know who I was when she approached with a look on her face like she was about to kick a homeless person off her parking spot. She threw her hands in the air and started yelling. "Who are you anyway? Why are you lurking around this property? This is private property, got it? If you don't clear out right now, I'm calling the cops." I couldn't hold back a smirk. It was almost funny. Karen glared at me like I was dirt under her designer shoes. I decided to play along a bit. "The police? Interesting. You sure they'll take your side when I tell them this is actually my land?" I said calmly, folding my arms. Her face twisted with a mix of surprise and fury. "Yours? Do you even know who you're talking to?" she hissed, stepping closer. My husband is the HOA president, and you're just a lazy bum trying to settle here without permission. Is your husband aware his crew is bearing asbestos on my property? I asked, still calm, though inside I was seething. That caught her off guard. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she was silent. Then she spoke again, even louder. That's a lie. You can't prove anything. You're just some con artist trying to exploit decent, law-abiding folks like us. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos, the broken fence, the bulldozer tracks, and the asbestos waste laying around. Take a look. Is that your idea of law-abiding? I asked, staring her right in the eye. She looked at the pictures, and her face went through several shades from red to pale. But instead of apologizing or admitting fault, Karen blew up again. It's fake. You forged it. You're just trying to set us up. Get out of here before I call my lawyers. I couldn't help but laugh. Go ahead and call your lawyers, or the fire department, or even the president of the country. But first, get the hell off my land, I said. This is my property, and now I know exactly what you've been doing. It's all lies. You'll never prove it, she screamed and stomped her foot right into a pile of dog poop that somehow happened to be there. She started ranting hysterically about her expensive shoes, scraping her foot on the ground, then ran back to her car. You'll regret getting tangled up with our family. You have no idea who you're dealing with. After that, things got drawn out and boring. In short, I got threatened a few times by some shady people, but they didn't even dare step onto my property. In the end, after several months of tough legal battle and bringing in environmental protection specialists, I gathered enough evidence against Karen's husband's company and the HOA itself. The lawyers filed a lawsuit citing illegal disposal of hazardous waste, environmental violations, and property damage. The court sided with me, awarding substantial compensation, several $1 million to cover losses and restore the farm. The judge ordered the defendants to fully clean up the property, remove the asbestos, and replace the contaminated soil with fresh, safe soil. Furthermore, the jury found Karen's husband guilty of organizing illegal waste disposal, and he received a real prison sentence for environmental crimes and document fraud. Once the work to restore the farm was finished, I stood on the porch of my family home, feeling a deep sense of relief. My grandfather's land was back to its former state, and his memory was preserved. The farm was clean and safe again, just the way he loved it. I'd love to hear more about what happened in court, but what can we do? Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.